All right, thank you very much, Jared. Let's call the meeting to order at 6:01, a meeting of the Community Development Authority today on the 12th of July. And first thing on the agenda should be roll call.
Kristen Runge,
Present.
Trisha Brown,
Present.
Al Dassow, David Kennedy, Todd McCulloch,
Present.
Jeff Chews,
Here.
Abigail Zellner.
All right, next item is approval of the minutes. Do we have any comments on the minutes or any corrections? They look good to me. I'll move to approve. Do we have a second?
Fastest meeting ever, so I will second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have, and no one's here to comment? Do we have anyone online?
Nick Mishler, Dr. Nick Mishler.
All right. And he doesn't want to comment? All right, then we will close public comment. Next item on the agenda is reports, a report from Tim. Tim, take it away.
Thank you. So as noted on the my report in the packet, there were several bills that made it through legislation related to affordable housing, 4 bills in particular, and all of them were provided funding through the state budget bill signed into or enacted by Governor Evers last week. Wisconsin Act 14, $275 million was allocated to that program. Wisconsin Act 15, $100 million. Wisconsin Act 18, $100 million, and Wisconsin Act 17, $50 million. All those funds will roll through WHEDA, the Wisconsin Housing and Economic Development Authority. According to the presser, this is one of the largest allocations of dollars for workforce housing and housing in general, $525 million in state's history. So we'll see how that plays out over time, but that's a big investment that will hopefully filter down to many communities. Also included in announcements, as some of you, maybe all of you are aware, the village board officially approved our Waunakee Housing Betterment Fund on June 5th of this year. The goal is to have the remaining forms. I think you may recall there's contract for services, application form, maybe a couple others that we need to, Brian and I need to finish working on. Our goal is to have those complete and ready to go so that the program can roll out the 4th quarter of this year, which would be in October. That will give us a little bit of time to promote the program and make people aware that we'll start taking applications. So that's an update on that. Let's see. Also, and this is fairly recent, then our next CDA meeting scheduled for August 9th. There will be a public hearing associated with the amendment to TID 9. So the project plan for that will be available in the next couple of days. It's relatively brief, but that is to allow a new parcel adjacent to Octopi come into that district. Again, like I said, the project plan should be available in the next couple of days, and we're going to be working with the applicant on a little bit different financing mechanism associated with that. So anyway, public hearing August 9th, hopefully many or all of you will be able to attend for that. And just by way of announcement, the night or the evening before on the 8th will be the initial kickoff meeting by the JRB, the organizational meeting to officially kickstart that process. So again, you'll be getting information from us as soon as possible about the project plan. So I think that's it for my report.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Tim?
Tim, with the new bills or bill, is there any opportunity that we should be thinking about pursuing in regards to some of that money or funding or is there any way we can utilize or leverage that?
Yeah, good question. Perhaps I can say I have not delved that deeply into the specific legislation. Some of them, or for example, are a commercial to housing conversion, a revolving loan fund for that. So we'll see what the particulars are about how the monies will flow out of WHEDA. But the answer is yeah. If something seems worthy, I'll certainly bring it to this body. And
I guess my comment is being, and I'm not certain I got the answer I was looking for yet, and that's being more proactive. Is there someone that we could actively solicit to that would come under one of these bills or criteria to help them with that process? Or, and I know later on, we're gonna talk about some things. I don't know if any of that would apply here, but I guess I'm looking for a little more active participation or progression or activity on our part to help with that.
We could, I mean, the answer is yeah, I mean, we could delve into that to pursue some of these programs.
So my guess though would be some of this has to be created by WEDA yet. So
Yeah,
they gave
right.
them some,
Because some of these are new
put this in
programs.
place, but then they have to go create the actual program. I'm assuming. Typically
Correct.
is how that works.
Correct.
Because it overlaps a lot of what we talked about already in some of these meetings.
Mhm.
So that's why I was asking the question.
Right. Other
Yeah.
questions or comments?
The budget bill was approved.
Oh, well, Governor Evers signed, but no.
Yeah. Some things that are still in the works of the state legislature, perhaps. So, all right. Any other questions or comments? No, let's go on to the next item on the agenda, and that is, let's see here. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the notes. I'm on the wrong page. Expansion of Affordable Housing Fund dollars. So,
Correct.
back to you,
So,
Tim.
segueing from our Housing Betterment Fund program, the village board approved an extension of TID 3 for 11 months, with a portion of that increment going to affordable housing. So that dollar amount, $775,000, significantly increases the potential to fund certain programs. And so obviously we've got our program yet to be officially started, but that's targeted toward primarily single family home owners for home rehabilitation. These dollars could be allocated to a number of things. And so really my hope was to initiate a conversation to start investigating whether they're, again, revolving loan funds or something like that, that may pique your interest or may, you'd want me to delve more deeply into. I can tell you though, that I do have something to share with you that I was just given the approval today, this afternoon, and I'm going to share my screen. A project that's right here in Wanakee. And this is a partnership between Madison Development Corporation and the American Legion. And what they're hoping to do is redevelop their site. And it will consist of two components, a residential component, 32 units, along with a new Legion building that would include increased space for assembly uses, event space and so forth that could be used by the public. So again, I just got this afternoon, so this is relatively new to me as well. But again, 32 workforce housing units would be part of the proposal. Some of the particulars are here regarding parking and so forth, and consisting of surface parking and underground parking, a mix of studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments. This is a real preliminary sketch or rendering of what the residential piece may look like for the building. 75% of those units would qualify for affordable housing. Again, this is very preliminary. And then there's some information that MDC or Madison Development Corporation has provided on what constitutes workforce housing. So I'm going to back up and just go back to the general site plan. Now, none of this is new as of today. So none of this has come before the village, the Plan Commission, village board, et cetera. So they'd likely need a CUP or maybe more to move forward with the construction of this. But really, I wanted to bring this to your attention as a project that is kind of in more than just in the queue. I mean, they're fairly well enough along to say, to ask the question, is this a type of project that maybe some of those new dollars as a result of the extension of TID 3 may be eligible for, somewhat like the Village on Main project. So I'll start there. Obviously, this isn't the only thing, but this like I said, came up in new today and talking with, so Lori Heineman, who lives in Wanakee, is involved, very involved with MDC. They, in fact, they had a groundbreaking groundbreaking today in Middleton for a 52 unit project. Large CDBG grant funded for that project. Anyway, open to discussion and just, is this the type of project that you want to at least give them the signal that the village, or at least the CDA may be recommended, or I'm sorry, the CDA may be interested in recommending approval of those dollars to fund this project, at least that move to the village board.
All right, what do you guys think? Anyone?
Is there, I guess Tim, are there a specific ask at this point?
Zero, no.
Specific ask at this point?
It's simply, would the CDA consider this a project worthy of some of these dollars being allocated? No, that there's no, 100,000, 700,000, et cetera, nothing yet, because this is, like I said, I just got this today.
My thought would be some potential rents up there if we got involved.
David? Oh, you gotta hit your button, sorry.
Green or red ones.
Yeah, I can see the greenhouse. The question being, they had shown some rents up there. If we get involved with those rents, potentially come down then. Or they, here's where they're gonna be and where would our dollars impact that?
Good question. I think those would be kinds of things that would be for opening up the discussion with them to have those questions answered by them. If they would be simply used, the dollars would be used to help fund the project to provide the housing units, or to the extent to which that would actually impact the rental rates, unknown at this point.
Well, that answered my question.
Okay.
Paying to the actual lowering the rents or paying for to help the development happen. So it sounds like that's more discussion.
Yeah.
So, I'm in favor of something like this. But I'd like to know about what other sources of funding they're getting too. If they're gonna come to the table. And most of it's funded by, in some form or another, taxpayers' dollars. I guess I'm less interested because they have alternate means to get where they gotta go. If the interest is, or it doesn't qualify, and I'm, whether it's low income housing or doesn't qualify for low income housing, and they use the term workforce housing versus low income housing, and I know we've talked about that many times, the differentiator on what that means. I don't know yet, but if it meets the criteria of workforce housing, I guess I'm in favor of proceeding, as long as the money's needed. And when I say that, if, in having looked at the number of real estate projects, if the rate of return on the project is 20% to the investors, I'm less inclined to say yes. If they need, and I understand they deserve a rate of return on their money. But if they need some money to help get to a point where it makes it economically feasible for them, I'm in favor of it. I don't know until I see all that stuff.
Yeah, so I think this is new enough that all those avenues haven't been explored yet. What I can say is that Lori shared with me that they have submitted an application with Dane County for their home program. They haven't heard anything yet. They don't know, but that's the extent of potential participation that I'm aware of. So I don't know, Brian, if you want to add anything to the discussion in terms of the way or the procedure or pathway it took for Cohen Esri to get to where they did in terms of participation by the village.
Well, my recollection is that Cohen Esri worked through WIDA.
Mhm.
And then we worked with WIDA, and that was one way to assure that the funding that was being provided by the village satisfied the definition of affordable housing within the statutes, because we can only provide the money if the project does that. And so, that's going to be, all of the points that you all have made are very valid and important. That's kind of the threshold question though, because whatever, because again, you kind of get into what does workforce housing mean? What do these other terms mean? the end of the day, if it doesn't qualify as affordable housing under the TID statute, we wouldn't be able to use that funding for it. Now, there's potentially other mechanisms potentially that could be used, but not the money in that was it TID 3 that got extended, the extension of TID 3. So that's going to be one of the questions the village is going to have to ask. Obviously for Cohen Esri, they did satisfy that. And so the village was able to participate.
So I guess the early information was, so like Cohen Esri, went their building was, I think 40 out of 50 of the units were earmarked for income qualified tenants. In this case, the initial is 75% or 3/4 of those 32 units would be set aside for that, but very early. I mean, a lot more discussion. And like I said, nothing has come before the village. So whether it's a rezoning, a CUP, a comp plan amendment, anything, we haven't looked at that at all yet, but it's just, so this is just at the very leading edge of discussion.
I think in general, it seems like a good project in a good location for a project of this nature, and great for the Legion to be able to do something higher and better for their own facility. But I do think with the other programs that we just talked about that are still a little bit unknown, looks like some of those maybe also be a fit for something like this. And without us having rolled out the original program and knowing what the demand might be for it, not that it would, I likely take all of the funds that we're going to have available, but I just think it's in concept, looks like a good project. But yeah, just kind of too soon before we have more information.
Would it be worth having Lori or members of her team come in once more details are known? To explain what, and maybe even a specific ask? That seems really early on that point right now, but
I think as they arrive at kind of what the project will look like, certainly, but still, we do want to roll out the betterment program and make sure we're not neglecting that and moving on to the next thing. So I think we'd be open for sure. And definitely whether or not we could fund it, would want to continue to hear more about it and probably support it in some way. Yeah. Todd or Abby, did you have any questions or comments?
Are they open to changing the unit mix at all? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
Or why they would not put 3-bedroom units in there?
Good question.
Yeah,
I
those
don't-
are questions,
yeah.
those questions I had right off the top of my head of like families
Yeah.
are looking for
Mhm.
3-bedroom units and there's not as many as there should be in this area. So
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
a thought.
I don't know if it's much of a question or a comment. I just was curious about how often the events at the American Legion, and would we get interference with the housing or any of that? Or, if they're cooking Friday fish fry, how much does that bother the tenants and stuff like that? So I just have some questions if they're dealing with those kind of issues when they're putting this kind of proposal together.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, so I think keep us posted.
Okay,
Mhm.
so this is one, this is certainly not the only, but it's just the timing of this happened to coincide nicely with this topic. So I don't know
Yeah.
how much more you want to talk about the use of these dollars, or if you want to steer me in a direction about looking for other things, or if you have any thoughts on potential uses for that money at this time.
I think one of the things we talked about last time is starting to market the program, the housing betterment
Mhm.
program specifically. Do you have any updates on that, or is that something that we should be tackling as a group or have a subcommittee? that
I
forms?
think we're gonna be doing that prior to that rolls out. So probably over the next 2 months, we're gonna have much more of a web and social media presence on that.
Okay. Let us know how we can help.
Okay.
Yeah, as your committee members for that. Other
So-
questions or comments?
So,
about-
so maybe I missed it, but are there other potential developments coming forth that may be requesting some dollars from affordable housing fund? And I say that because obviously today I saw for the first time the Tierney's development on south of Woodland, west of Hugh. And I know Viridian's doing their thing out here, and there's talk about expanding Viridian's project the rest of the way to Schumacher
Yep,
Road.
yep.
But are there other potentials? Only because if we do something with this group, then our other folks gonna come to the table and ask for something comparable. And do we get back to the corner when they say, hey, we gave you X, why don't we get X?
So not that I'm aware of, to answer your question, but I think that would be the same or a similar situation to Cohen Esri where there was a pot of money and then they were awarded some of it. And then now the rest of it, like, what do you do with it? So it could be another potential outcome of now that it's out there, if you will, that these dollars exist, that maybe in and of itself be a catalyst for more developers to approach the village and say, hey, what do you think about this? Kind of like the Legion project.
Well, and that's one of the concerns. The other is that I don't want to get us to a position where we say, yes, we got these developer requests and we got to fund the developer requests, whatever they are. And then that precludes us from doing anything else, whether it's with some of the other programs we talked about, whether it's how do we senior affordability or workforce affordability, some other programs we've talked about. I don't want to necessarily say, you know, we're going to give all the money to developers and nothing to the other programs, because I think we initially talked about how do we make housing affordable in Wanakee. And I don't think giving money to developers necessarily will get us where we go entirely. I think there's a lot of folks who could, whether it's the improvement program or some of the other programs we talked about, I think those are just as valuable as sometimes this is as well.
Well, one of the things I heard earlier was the marketing of it. Do we talk about how we would kind of talk about we have money available, or we want to hear good ideas, or, you know, it seems like maybe we try to find a way to say it so that we can get different ideas across. I think the idea of like you said, you know, the whole different categories, and maybe that be part of the marketing. It's not just developer money, but it's senior living or betterment of housing and stuff like that. Or is it just word of mouth? Everybody knows that already.
I don't think it's word of mouth yet. I think one of the things that we could explore doing in the future, we talked about doing an RFP at some point in time for some different programs we had. I feel like it's about a year and a half ago now, where you did a presentation over 2 separate meetings, Tim, that outlined all of the different options that we had. And we've had quite a few pre-pandemic. We had a couple of presentations for some really novel programs that led to home ownership that I'm actually not sure that those companies are still out there anymore after the pandemic. Now that I think about it, I've heard about them lately. But maybe that is one thing we want to do in a future meeting, is kind of review some of those options, perhaps. And kind of go over that list again. It's been a while since we did that.
I think Al's got a great point to help us and to protect us. We ought to talk about is there a percentage, categories and percentage, so we have some kind of guidelines that it's not, you know, here's the first one, now's the second one. We make independent decisions each time. I think that's a risk.
Did
So I
Cohen
think-
Esri set the table?
I think that's up to us to decide if they
I
set the
think it's
table.
up to
Yeah.
That's, it's absolutely up to you.
I understand
Yeah.
that. Understand it.
And it's also, to be clear, I mean, like, neither Veridian or the Tierney's in the Kilkenny West are pursuing developments that would qualify for any type of funding through this. They're doing market rate housing. And so, I mean, one thing to always keep in mind is there's a pretty significant threshold for anybody who wants to get money under this program, which is you have to qualify as affordable housing under the statute.
The other thing I would add with marketing, so we're gonna market our housing betterment fund, but I think it is, maybe to your point, Al, it may be a little bit too early to market these dollars when we don't really know what we're gonna be doing with them. You all, or most of you all, know how long it took us to get to that point. So to simply say, hey, we got this big pool, jump in, it might be a little early for that. Because if we do that, you know, build it and they will come kind of thing, we will get people knocking on the door of Wanakee going, oh, we'd like some of that. And if we don't really know where the priority areas for that might be, then you're right, we're going to be entertaining any and every ask.
And don't get me wrong, I really do like the fact we got local people developing and they create what we want and we contribute the money to that project. I like that idea. As opposed to someone coming from the outside who has no real interest and want to keep but for that particular housing complex. So I do like the fact that these guys have some connection to Wanakee.
So is our answer maybe to Madison Development Corporation specifically, want to keep talking, but we're still figuring out what we're doing? Yeah. And we're really interested. I mean, this is whether or not we're able to participate, this looks like a spectacular project. And a really good use of that site.
Do you have any time? I know it's early, but do you have any timelines on this as to? what
I
their thoughts are?
don't. I don't.
I don't think we need to be real concerned about developers asking us for money. I mean, that's been a given for a lot of years.
They won't be shy, will they? No. And that's good because we want them to come to us. Yeah, we want that activity here.
So for the next time we discuss this, whether it's the next meeting or following meetings, do you want me to kind of dust off some of those other projects or those other programs rather, and then look at what other communities have done in the interim since, the last couple of years?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. I know, I mean, even though I was here for those presentations, it's been enough time that I could
had so
really
many
use
of
it.
them.
Yeah, we did. We did. I mean, it was great, the variety that was
I do
presented.
think we need to define the mix. What are the different categories? And then
Yeah.
it gives us something to point at and say, is there 20% here and 50% here or?
Yeah, I like that planning as well.
I do think whatever comes out of the new programs that WIDA will play into that conversation, because it's either something we can leverage and build on, or if they're gonna fill a space that we don't have to. I mean, I think that will impact the discussion too.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you. Any more on this item before we move on to the next? All right, next item on the list is a discussion on possible acquisition of downtown parcels for redevelopment and a possible recommendation to the village board. And Tim, you were going to present a little bit of this and then we might go into closed session.
Correct.
Correct.
So, and Brian's going to help me out with the mechanics of that. But to start off the discussion, this is really meant as a broad discussion about the degree to which you think the village should play a role as a public entity into redevelopment, I guess, regardless of where it may be. I think safe to say that perhaps the downtown area, there's, some older buildings that may be more worthy of scrutinizing, but just in general, what role do you think the village should have in terms of proactivity for some sites that maybe have seen less investment over time by the the private sector, and what maybe we could do to participate in that, which then may lead to specific questions about specific places. And then at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brian and walk through what that might look like in terms of going into closed session.
Yeah, so I mean, the policy discussion on whether or not the CDA would want to make a recommendation to the village board on acquisition of land, whether it's downtown or elsewhere, that's a discussion that needs to occur in open session. Is this a good idea? What are the pros and cons of acquiring property and then selling it? What we're allowed to talk about in closed session would be if we're going to have a discussion about a specific property or properties. And the reason for the distinction is whether we should acquire land generally for village purposes or, to assist the village, that's a policy issue. The reason why you go into closed session for specific properties is there are entities out there that if you discuss this in open session, then they're going to pursue the property first, seek to buy it with the idea of, okay, now a municipality is interested, I'm going to be able to flip it and make money, which obviously then harms the taxpayers because we just paid more for property than we otherwise would have theoretically if, having the discussion in closed session where these third parties aren't aware of the properties that we're looking at. I think you start with and then it may be, it may be that as a body, your thought process is, it doesn't make sense for us to acquire land, in which case you probably don't need to go into closed session.
All right, so the question is, do we think that it's an appropriate role for the village to look at acquiring property for redevelopment? if that should become available and appropriate. Correct?
And I may lean on Brian or Trish or others who Kristen, you may recall, I think the village did some property acquisition several years ago I think it was in the downtown area. And that was met with varying degree of success. I think that may have been during the time of the housing downturn, which played a big role in how the pace of redevelopment. So certainly something to take into consideration, but again, wanted to at least open the door on the discussion.
I personally think it's worth the discussion.
I agree. I agree. I wouldn't want to exclude us or preclude us from ever pursuing property when it becomes appropriate.
As a general rule, I would say that we shouldn't be purchasing private property to develop it. I think our viewpoint should be if there are obstacles to developing a property, infrastructure, things that, add a extraordinary amount of cost to developing a project, that's where we should be thinking about getting involved. But in terms of just the basic, I'm going to buy these 3 old houses, tear them down and build something up. That's really got to stand on its own unless they're going to come back to us with subsidized housing into that property. But again, like I say, but my number one thing would be if the village is going to get involved, it should be because there's some extraordinary circumstances. The whole sewer area has to be, redone, and it adds, a couple $100,000 to a project that's just cutting it. So.
Just to piggyback off that, keep in mind too, that if any municipality is looking to purchase property and then flip it for development, we're going to have to make a determination that the property that we've acquired is blighted. Because if it's not blighted, we statutorily cannot acquire it but through eminent domain and then sell it to a different party to develop. But I think that's when you see municipalities acquire land, many times they're acquiring it because of the blighted condition. So you are allowed to acquire it by the statutes. And then the greatest benefit of owning it then is you have greatest control. Now your control goes beyond our standard ordinances, our standard zoning. We can really say, because we own it, we're going to sell it to you through an RFP process. And this is exactly what we want to see go there. So that's the greatest benefit, I would say, of the ownership.
Brian, just a point of clarification in that example, you're referencing if the owner is not willing to sell. But if the owner is willing to sell, then
we have to have a real tight agreement. It depends, especially if the person comes to the municipality, then it's much easier to demonstrate that there was no threat that we were going to exercise condemnation to acquire it. You can work around that issue through agreements if we're approaching them, but it can get a little bit dicier. They definitely have to sign something acknowledging, well, first of all, we have to say in writing that we would not exercise condemnation to acquire your land. And then they're going to have to agree to that. Where it gets a little bit dicier for municipalities is if it is blighted, you don't necessarily want to say that we're not going to acquire it through condemnation, because it may be that it turns out you want to do that. And so that's where you really start getting into specific property by property issues of how do you would want to address them. And I'll leave it at that.
So this is something completely different from the extension of the TIF money.
Yes.
First time we've talked about a topic that's not affordable housing in years, really. Yeah, it's a very different kind of development.
So I guess
perhaps.
whatever comes out of here in terms of a recommendation, if there's general consensus that no, it's not going to, then we probably won't bring anything to the village board. But if there is interest, then a recommendation on whatever that would be would likely be forwarded to the board.
I know there's a hesitancy on some of the downtown properties to do anything because of certain issues that are out there. And with some of the things that have been mentioned already, they probably would qualify for the reason that we could acquire the property. So in that case, I guess I would have to disagree with David. In that case, I would suggest we may want to do something in regards to acquiring property, but in general, I would agree that if it comes to the government versus private enterprise, let private enterprise figure it out. But in other cases, and I was involved very heavily with the Main and Madison Street project. Inquiring and RFPs and talking to builders and developers and all that kind of stuff. And it was a struggle to get people to buy into that because it was for lack of a better term, blighted. I don't think it was necessarily blighted as much as perhaps it could have been or should have been or would have or was, but it was a struggle to get it going, but we had to get something going downtown because it was stale. And that was what we thought would get at least the downtown headed in some direction.
Yeah, my recollection from that is when the village acquired that property, it wasn't necessarily intending to then resell it for $1, which is what it did. But the circumstances of 2008, 2009 and the downturn ultimately led to that. But I think it did work. Ultimately, it worked. I mean, because I think that project did help stimulate some of the other things. And now if you drive downtown Wanakee, it looks fantastic. I mean, my opinion, it looks fantastic. And I know Todd has got pictures from like comparison of 2004 to like 2020, and it's pretty drastic change.
Just for the record, and should we go into closed session? Before we go into closed session, for those that are listening, what does blighted mean? And is there a certain level of blightedness or is this a moving?
Well, I wouldn't call it I mean, there's certain properties where it's just clearly it's blighted. I mean, there's a statutory definition. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. You know, I think where you really have difficulty is when you hit some properties where they're maybe in the gray area. And that's where, but then I think that's kind of where you get to have the policy discussion of too. I mean, if it's truly blighted, I think it makes it a little bit easier for a municipality to justify the acquisition of the property because clearly whoever owns it, and it may be somebody local, it may be somebody out of state, is just saying, I'm not willing to put money into this. And particularly if it's at a key location, that can play a role. If you have the property that is maybe blighted, but maybe not, then I think sometimes you see municipalities go back in the way of, you know what, we're going to let the market take care of this because even though maybe it's not exactly what we want right now, it's close enough. And all of a sudden this person could sell it. And now somebody else comes in and they do a bang up job with it. So part of what you're looking at is just the structure of the building. I mean, even if it's vacant, if it's a good structure of a building, many times municipalities will say, we'll let the market take care of that.
Which is what we were also some of our discussion was around improvements of an improvement fund to help people bring their properties that I don't think it's blighted. It's not going to fall down, what we were talking about, but siding and windows and shingles and that sort of thing, where it was a discussion that we had. And again, that goes back to where do we allocate? Where do we decide we want to allocate our dollars?
That was specific to housing though. Would we feel differently about commercial buildings?
That was
Yeah.
housing.
Yeah.
yes. But there's,
I will let you know that Mount Horeb has a downtown district and a TIF district. And they have a program that I think would be very similar to the program that you all passed and that Tim prepared, except theirs is not related to the affordable housing. It's just a TIF program to help downtown businesses, you know, make their properties look nicer. So they have an application process very similar to what the village has, but it's not limited just to the affordable housing definition in the statutes. It was part of the reason why they created the downtown TIF was to be able to provide that funding. They also have the benefit of a rather large new Duluth trading company structure down there that, you know, there's TIF financing that was provided to that as a separate agreement. But my understanding is, and I'm the Mount Horeb attorney, so this is why I know this. Because the Duluth building has gone so well, it maybe has created a larger pool of money than for other businesses to draw upon as part of the TIF program. So that's always something that the village can contemplate too. I mean, I know that we already have a downtown TIF, but I'm not sure to what extent that type of concept is built into the project plan. We'd have to look at that. Oh, that's what you're doing right now.
All right.
That was part of the reason why I asked the earlier questions about the Governor Evers signing the bill recently as to what buildings would some of this money apply to? Because I think there is cases in our downtown properties where they would be eligible for some of the money based on the brief summaries that's here. And that's where I was getting at with that concept, and us not wanting to overlap our money with what money is out there.
So do we have a general consensus of yes or no, that this is something that could be a possibility or something that we are definitely recommending against at this moment? Possibility, possibility,
Yes.
possibility. David, you're like, maybe, maybe a possibility.
Gotta replace the sewers.
Yeah.
If it's certainly something that's available and if it needs to be expanded or bigger or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that should be priority over than the type of monies that we have.
Do we want to go into closed session and discuss specific potential opportunities?
I would move if that's a motion to make to go into closed session.
We, for there, it's part of it. We need to, if you can scroll down, we would need to make a motion to go into closed session based on the language that's in the. So, yeah, it's that, but I mean, if somebody actually wants to read it, so you see the first star there would say the CDA. So we're already on the agenda item, and so somebody would need to make a motion to move into closed session on agenda item 3, I think it is, and then read that, and then we have a roll call vote based on that.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll move to go into closed session as authorized by Wisconsin statute 19.851E for the purpose of deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. The CDA may reconvene, oh, do I say that?
Yep.
Part? The CDA may reconvene in open session and discuss and take action on the subject matter discussed in closed session.
I'll second. All right, do we have any discussion on the motion? All in favor of going into
Oh, no,
closed?
we need to do a roll call vote.
Oh, okay. Let's do a roll call vote. Tim,
Kristen Runge,
aye.
Tricia Brown,
Aye.
Al Dasso,
Aye.
David Kennedy,
Aye.
Todd McCulloch,
Aye.
Jeff Tews.
Aye.
And Abigail Zellner.
Hi.
All right, the motion to go into closed session passes. And we will go into, do I have to announce the time that we go into closed session? We'll go into closed session at 6:45, and Jared, you'll give us a signal when we're off. Closed session has ended at 7:37. Do we have a final motion for the meeting today? Oh, wait, one more thing.
Sorry,
I'm
just
sorry
one,
if I
one
skipped over
reminder to you all and as well as those watching the public. The next meeting of the CDA will be August 9th at 6 o'clock. And that's at that meeting will be the public hearing associated with the TIF 9 amendment.
Excellent. Discuss tip 9 on the 9th. Nice how that worked out. All right, any other motions tonight?
What about a motion to adjourn?
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll see you guys on the 9th. Some of you beforehand. And thank you, Todd and Abby, for joining us today. So.